Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown and sick with COVID.
Here I am. Can you believe, Mike? I managed, we were talking about this before we started. I never get sick.
No.
Right? Never.
No.
And I got COVID after all these years. I've never had it, and I got it a day before my birthday.
Ugh, that is so lame.
So I'm going to be probably a little bit more quiet, which half the listeners will probably appreciate in this episode.
Well, I appreciate you showing up, buddy.
This show must go on, my friend.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
Sheree Fertuck, a 51-year-old businesswoman, mother of 3 and grandmother from Saskatchewan, disappeared on December 7, 2015 after leaving her family's lunch gathering at her mother's farm in Kenaston to return to work at a nearby gravel pit. The next day, her abandoned gravel truck was found in the pit with her belongings inside, raising immediate concerns about her unexplained disappearance. Despite extensive ground searches by her family, friends, and the police around the gravel pit and other locations, no trace of Sheree Fertuck has ever been found. RCMP and Sheree's family believe she was abducted, or worse, murdered. As the weeks and months passed with no sign of Sheree, suspicion fell on her estranged husband, Gregory Mitchell Fertuck, 62. The pair had been going through a contentious divorce for some years. The RCMP undertook an undercover operation to acquire a confession to Sheree's murder. Due to legal challenges and COVID restrictions hampering proceedings, it was not until June 2024 that this case was finally resolved. This is Dark Poutine, episode 324. What happened to Sheree Fertuck? Sheree Fertuck was a strong, self-sufficient, industrious woman and devoted parent who worked long hours and was said to be entirely dependable. Some described her as a tough customer. She grew up in the rural village of Kenaston, Saskatchewan. Kenaston sits neatly between Regina and Saskatoon within the rural municipality of McCraney No. 282. It lies along Highway 11, Louis Riel Trail, at the junction of Highways 15 and 19, roughly halfway between Regina, around 150 kilometers southeast, and Saskatoon, around 150 kilometers northeast. The village is located in a scenic area of Saskatchewan within the rolling Allen Hills region. Its history dates back to the early 20th century. The nearby Whitecap Dakota First Nation is part of Saskatchewan's Indigenous Tourism Corridor, offering cultural experiences and education about Indigenous history and traditions. Originally known as Bonington Springs in the district of Assiniboia, Northwest Territories, the settlement was established in 1902 when the Saskatchewan Valley Land Company, led by wealthy Americans, purchased vast tracts of land from the railway. They employed aggressive advertising tactics, attracting hundreds of settlers between 1902 and 1910. After Saskatchewan became a province in late 1905, the village's name was changed to Kenaston, honoring F.E. Kenaston, the vice president of the Saskatchewan Valley Land Company. The village was incorporated in 1910, and businesses like stores, hotels, and grain elevators quickly emerged to serve the growing population. Additionally, the area of Kenaston and Bladworth saw settlements of people of Croatian origin starting in 1904, with families like Pavlich, Perpik, Masic, and Tomiljanovic establishing homesteads there. These settlers came from villages in Croatia's coastal mountain range, forming one of Canada's largest rural Croatian communities at the time. A consummate debater, Sheree initially attended university after high school to become a lawyer, but soon returned home disillusioned. At the age of 18, she obtained her semi-truck driver's license to help with her family's concrete and gravel crushing company, M&S Ready Mix, run by her father, Michael Sorotsky. Sheree was described as a big, strong, muscular woman from years of physical labor hauling gravel and doing other strenuous work for the family business.
You know, it's interesting to see that she was going to go to uni to be a lawyer, but then return to the family business. And it's, I actually, do you know people that have done that? I know so many people in my life who studied one thing, but if their families had family businesses, they just ended up working for the fam biz.
There's a few that I know, yep. Yeah.
I think there's maybe, if something's in the family, it's probably a stronger calling in a lot of ways, you know?
Yep. Yeah, like my buddy Peter became a plumber because his dad was a plumber.
Yeah, but if there's a business owned by the family, right? It's like gotta keep it going. You know, dad or mom created it. You know,
exactly.
Or grandpa or grandma, right?
After her father died in 2010, Sheree took over M&S Ready Mix, handling the business transactions and bids, while her brother Darren oversaw the gravel crushing operations. Despite her tough exterior from hard work, Sheree loved lighthearted activities too. Being a fan of the Saskatchewan Roughriders team, she loved to talk about football and followed her team closely. In 1991, she married Gregory Mitchell Fertuck, who worked for the Canadian National Railway. They had their honeymoon in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Sheree and Greg had 3 children together, Lucas, Lauren, and Lana, settling in Saskatoon. Although on the outside things appeared normal, behind closed doors there was trouble in the Fertuck home. The Fertuck children later spoke of violent episodes within their home thanks to Greg's excessive drinking and gambling. In November 2010, Sheree had gone to the police after an argument with Greg, during which he had been drinking heavily and threatened to kill her. She reported that Greg had become enraged when she took away one of his handguns. Court records from 2011 showed another serious altercation where Greg assaulted Sheree at their family home. This incident led to Greg pleading guilty to multiple charges, including assault and possession of prohibited firearms. Despite the severity of the charges, Greg received an absolute discharge after completing a domestic violence program, which meant no conviction was registered on his record.
Another woman failed right there.
Yeah. Yeah, the system definitely failed Sheree.
Domestic violence program. Do you think that getting a bunch of guys into a room going, it's bad, okay, is going to stop them from doing it?
I don't know. I've never had to attend one. I mean, I was an angry person. I probably should have attended some anger management way back in the day. Who knows if it's helpful or not, but you never really hear about the cases that it actually does do some good. Greg Fertuck's violent tendencies and heavy drinking were well known within their community. People who interacted with him frequently noted a stark difference in his behavior when he was sober versus when he was drinking. Greg was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde when it came to booze. While sober, he was described as quiet and decent, but alcohol would turn him irritable and aggressive. As their marriage deteriorated, Greg Fertuck told people it was all Sheree's fault, telling them not to believe her kind and friendly demeanor. He claimed that what went on behind closed doors was another matter. Sheree and Greg filed for separation in 2011, and the fight over family assets began as the couple worked toward dissolving their marriage. Sheree's lawyer, Tammy Hackle, represented Sheree in her family law litigation with Greg Fertuck. Hackle noted that Sheree was down-to-earth, practical, and steady, unlike many other family law clients. She had no concerns about Sheree's mental health or stability. Sheree had initiated the court action against Greg but wanted to work things out directly with him to avoid legal expenses. Her petition included a divorce claim but not spousal support. One of Sheree's concerns was that Greg had to repay a $50,000 loan which he'd taken, and she didn't want any part of it as it would affect the family home she wanted to keep for her children. In May 2012, Sheree informed her lawyer that she and Greg had reached a deal on child support, but he later reneged. A child support order for $871 per month was obtained in June 2012, and Greg's wages were garnished due to non-payment. By 2013, the issue had been referred to the Maintenance Enforcement Office, as Greg had not been paying voluntarily. Sheree's family property division claim included an unequal division due to the $50,000 loan agreement and some exemption claims for pre-existing property. Tammy Hackle mentioned that Sheree did not always follow her advice. At one point, Greg's lawyer requested $15,000 from his Lyra retirement account, which required Sheree's permission. Despite Hackle's advice to agree, Sheree refused, insisting that Greg should not receive any money until the overall property matter was resolved. This litigation was not settled until September 2018, years after Sheree had disappeared. Despite all the trouble at home, Sheree built her business over the years. Even after their separation, she occasionally hired Greg Fertuck, now retired from CN after 30 years, to assist at the gravel pit despite their troubles. In 2015, Sheree landed a great contract. It was close to her mother's farm in Kenaston, so although the family home was in Saskatoon, Sheree could occasionally stay at her mother's house. Blair's Fertilizer, an agricultural company, was constructing a facility near Hanley. Martin Coyle, the project manager for Tex Canada Logistics, said initially there were rough estimates of the gravel needed. Sheree was one of the bidders and persistently pursued the contract, competing with a contractor named Jeff Sagan. Sagan initially won for a better price, but lost the contract after disputes over the amount of gravel delivered. The contract was then awarded to Sheree, upsetting Sagan. While there were rumors about her dispute with Sagan, Martin Coyle did not ever see it. Sheree began operations in August 2015. She consistently supplied good quality gravel and met project demands by hiring more trucks and drivers, including Greg Fertuck. She delivered 4 to 6 loads daily. Coyle's last interaction with Sheree was on December 3, 2015, and everything seemed normal. Sheree was strictly business and did not discuss her personal life. She was a hard-working, shrewd manager and good operator who stood by her word and expected the same from others.
You know, she's just one solid woman.
Yeah, right?
Right, and I don't want to do stereotypes, but this is a very sort of prairie sort of person.
Right.
Solid, dependable, get shit done, no sort of frivolousness around it.
Yeah.
There's a real strength in the prairies that I find.
December 7, 2015 began as a normal day for Sheree Fertuck. She woke up, got ready, and went to work. Her family last spoke with her around lunchtime. However, she missed evening appointments and did not drop off her final loads of gravel for the day. When family members tried to call her, she did not answer or return to her mother's farm as expected. This caused her family, of course, to become concerned. The next morning, Sheree's mother, Julianne, and Sheree's youngest daughter, Lana, went to the gravel pit. They found Sheree's semi-unit with the lights on and the keys in the ignition. Her jacket and cell phone were in the cab, but there was no cellular service in the gravel pit. Everything else seemed normal, with no signs of a struggle or accident, yet Sheree was gone. This behavior was completely uncharacteristic of Sheree. She was known to be highly responsible and never disappeared without a word, and it didn't make sense for someone to wander off without a jacket during the winter in Saskatchewan. If Sheree had left on her own volition, she would have turned off her truck's lights and taken her keys and phone. Her family called the police to report Sheree missing. Lana, who'd gone to the pit with her grandmother that day, later said she immediately thought her dad was responsible in some way.
That says a lot if your kids are thinking you're responsible immediately.
Yep.
You know, of course I felt bad for Sheree, but Sheree's gone now, and it's her kids, right?
Yeah. There was no reason for Sheree to walk off without a word. Numerous witnesses, including her 3 children, consistently described Sheree as a devoted mother and daughter. She was protective of her children and her dog, Charlie. She adored her grandchild and was making future plans around family and work. She had never before left the Kenaston or Saskatoon areas without informing someone. All agreed that her disappearance was entirely out of character. In the early days after Sheree vanished, RCMP officers searched the pit, digging into gravel piles under the assumption that Sheree may have been accidentally buried, potentially compromising some evidence of her disappearance in the effort. The investigations utilized cadaver dogs, infrared technology, and aerial surveillance in their hunt. Community volunteers, under the guidance of the local pastor Gene Whitehead, were instructed to watch for unusual activities that might hint at Sheree's whereabouts. The weather also contributed to the failure of early search efforts. The harsh Saskatchewan winters can significantly hamper search efforts for missing persons. The province experiences bitterly cold temperatures, heavy snowfall, and extreme wind chill conditions during winter. These conditions make outdoor search operations extremely challenging and dangerous for search teams. Thick snow cover can conceal potential evidence or clues, while freezing temperatures can preserve or degrade evidence unpredictably. Blizzards and whiteout conditions reduce visibility, making navigating and covering large search areas difficult. The frigid temperatures also pose risks of frostbite and hypothermia for searchers, limiting the duration and intensity of search efforts. Additionally, frozen lakes and rivers present hazards for search teams attempting to access remote or rural areas. The police formally spoke with Greg Fertuck on December 9th and 10th, 2015. Both interviews were brief, audio-taped statements, during which the police determined that Greg was lying about key details. Greg claimed Sheree had scheduled him to work at the pit on the day that Sheree disappeared. Another employee, Dylan DeRosier, told police that no more work was needed due to weather conditions. Greg also denied ongoing animosity toward Sheree, claiming they were considering reconciliation. Sheree's family and friends adamantly disputed this. When Greg was brought in for his second interview, he stuck to his claims, but it was clear to the investigators that Greg Fertuck was drunk. Greg's behavior and responses were incongruent with the evidence and gave seasoned officers pause enough to want to look further into his possible involvement in Sheree's disappearance. The evidence gathering continued at the pit and other possible sites. On December 10th, RCMP Sergeant Ryan Clooney was there to take aerial photographs with a remote-controlled drone. Sergeant Clooney noticed that it had snowed at least 10 centimeters the previous night, complicating matters. Clooney and his team searched for viable fingerprints but found none due to the dirty equipment. A small amount of blood was found on the loader in the pit. On December 12th, a presumptive test on the loader's bucket returned positive for blood.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason for blood to be on that bucket. That's not a good sign at all.
Someone could have hurt themselves at work, blah, blah, blah. It's easy to explain, but considering they were looking for a missing woman, blood on the loader is definitely something they would have to look at. By December 14th, 2015, RCMP Sergeant Clement Haga informed Sheree Fertuck's family that the police believed her disappearance was a homicide and that she was unlikely to be alive. Although the police did not inform the family that Gregory Fertuck was officially under suspicion, Sheree's mother, children, and sisters all independently urged the authorities to investigate him, without prompting. Sheree had shared her fears about Greg with Julianne, which made him, in her mind, a prime focus in her daughter's disappearance. By that time, the family knew that both Greg and Sheree's brother Darren, who had taken over the family's concrete and gravel crushing business, were being closely monitored by the police. Both had something to gain from Sheree's disappearance. However, Darren was soon ruled out. The RCMP explored various avenues: Sheree's family, potential business rivals, and neighbors, looking for any leads or motives behind her disappearance. They kept coming back to one place: Gregory Fertuck. On December 21st, Fertuck's truck was searched and presumptively tested for blood, yielding a small number of positive results. Subsequent laboratory testing confirmed it was Sheree Fertuck's blood. Again, this was circumstantial, as there could have been an accident unrelated to her disappearance in which Sheree ended up bleeding on the truck. Search warrants were obtained to search Greg Fertuck's home as well. Inside his residence, firearms and ammunition were found, including .22 caliber ammunition, but no corresponding firearm. The police questioned the absence of the matching gun and wondered about its whereabouts. As winter turned to spring, the RCMP announced publicly that Sheree was likely dead and a homicide victim, shifting the search from a rescue to recovery. In April 2016, after the snow had melted, police tactically searched the gravel pit for evidence. They found 2 .22 caliber shell casings about 10 to 20 feet from where the semi and loader had been parked, along with 2 zip ties nearby. The shell casings were kept as holdback evidence, and Greg Fertuck was not informed about them during interviews with him. The Kenaston community gradually returned to normal, but Sheree's family, especially her mother, sought closure and justice. The investigation remained open, driven by the determination of the family and law enforcement. In May 2016, 6 months after Sheree vanished, a civil case in the Court of Queen's Bench in Saskatoon revealed an RCMP affidavit stating investigators believed Greg Fertuck had murdered her. This marked the first direct accusation of Greg Fertuck, as documented by RCMP Corporal Jeremy Anderson, who said there were reasonable grounds for the belief. Despite these allegations, Greg consistently denied involvement through his lawyer. Sheree's family was not surprised by the revelation of police suspicion of Greg Fertuck, of course, and they hoped they were getting closer to a resolution. However, an arrest in Sheree Fertuck's murder was still years away. More after a quick break.
The island of Newfoundland keeps its secrets close, shrouds them in mystery. But once in a while, the fog is lifted, the truth comes out.
I get a feeling there's something going on here. My whole body was shaking.
You go to bed believing that you're a certain person one night, and then all of a sudden the next day, everything that you've known is not true.
This is not the life that I should have lived.
I'm Luke Quinton from CBC. This is Come By Chance. Available now.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
On a night cold enough to freeze your bones, a prospector searching for a legendary cursed gold mine vanishes without a trace. I'm Crew Williams, the host of Dead Man's Curse. This season, we retrace the steps of fortune seekers looking for a mother lode worth billions who never came back. So come join our quest. Search for and follow Dead Man's Cursed Volcanic Gold on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
And we are back. Matthew, thoughts?
Like I said earlier, she's a solid, dependable woman. For some reason, frankly, married somebody totally beneath her.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she just deserved a better partner than this guy.
Yeah. On October 25th, 2017, Greg Fertuck was arrested as police continued to build their case in Sheree Fertuck's suspected homicide. RCMP Sergeant Clement Haga cited extensive reasonable grounds for the arrest. Sheree had no mental, physical, or financial issues that could explain her disappearance. Searches of the gravel pit, Mr. Fertuck's home, and his vehicle had yielded useful information. Sheree's bank account and credit cards were unused after December 7, 2015, and her bills had gone unpaid. Suicide was unlikely given her stable, dependable nature and close family ties. The crime scene at the gravel pit was suspicious. The semi was left with the keys in it and the lights on, Sheree's phone and jacket inside, and a loader left on site. Greg Fertuck had financial problems and a possible motive to harm Sheree. Their separation was contentious, and Greg's claim of being scheduled for more work contradicted the account of another employee, Dylan DeRosier. Forensic DNA evidence showed spots of Sheree's blood in Greg's truck, and cell phone data placed Greg in the area despite his denial. Additionally, Greg's statements to the police were inconsistent and conflicted with other evidence and previous incidents of domestic violence. After Greg Fertuck's arrest, Doris LaRocque, his latest girlfriend, was interviewed separately from Greg and cautioned about potentially being an accessory after the fact. She claimed not to know anything about Sheree's disappearance. Sergeant Clement Haga later found discrepancies between Greg's and Doris's statements. Despite these findings, the Crown did not approve charges at that time. Greg and Doris were released, and the police had to go back to the drawing board. So, over the next few months, the police worked behind the scenes, gathering more evidence and trying to move the investigation into Sheree's murder forward. Sadly, in July 2018, Sheree's biggest advocate, her mom, Julianne Sorotsky, passed away suddenly. Julianne was pivotal in shedding light on Sheree's life and her troubled relationship with Greg Fertuck. Julianne's passing left a significant void and renewed the determination of those investigating Sheree's disappearance to find answers.
I always find it sad when a loved one dies before they know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when they're dead, it just doesn't matter anymore. But
it matters to everybody else, maybe even a little more.
Yeah, but not to the person who's gone. Like, you kind of wish they could have gone to sleep, with an understanding what happened. Yeah.
What Julianne and the rest of Sheree's loved ones didn't know was that in June of 2018, the RCMP put a tried and true investigative technique into motion. If you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you know what I'm going to say. Matthew, I'll leave it to you.
Oh, God. You're giving me another Mr. Big episode, aren't you?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. See, I'm too sick to get overly rambunctious, but I still think this might get my blood going.
Well, we don't want you fainting or anything like that. For those unfamiliar, the Mr. Big undercover sting operation is a controversial technique used by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to elicit confessions from suspects in cases where there is insufficient evidence, often in cold murder cases like this one. Here's a brief overview of how it works. The operation begins with undercover officers befriending and gaining the suspect's trust over an extended period, sometimes several months. The officers pretend to be a part of a fictional criminal organization, introducing the suspect to various members and having them perform minor tasks that appear criminal but are completely staged. As the suspect gets more involved with a fake crime syndicate, they are eventually told they must confess a previous crime, usually a murder, to the boss known as Mr. Big to become a fully trusted member. Mr. Big is played by an experienced interrogator who uses tactics like fear, intimidation, incentives, or promises of protection to compel the suspect to confess. The entire operation is carefully orchestrated, with the conversations and meetings recorded to capture any incriminating statements or confessions made by the suspect. The goal is to create an environment where the suspect feels compelled to disclose details about their alleged crime to gain acceptance into the fictional criminal organization. Critics argue that these stings are unethical, violate suspects' rights, and increase the risk of false confessions due to the psychological pressure and inducements used by the officers. Nonetheless, the RCMP has used this controversial technique in over 350 cases across Canada, leading to numerous convictions.
I wonder how many led to no convictions. I wonder how many were done to people that were not guilty at all.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'd like to see those numbers.
The stats of the failed Mr. Big.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. I'll dig into it. The RCMP carefully tracked Greg Fertuck's habits, activities, and associates to gather information for the sting. Operation Fiston began on June 6, 2018, and 136 scenarios would follow. The first stage of a Mr. Big operation is known as the bump, or the initial contact phase, where the undercover officers engage the target to build trust and integrate them into the fictitious criminal organization. The objective is establishing a non-threatening initial contact, creating a plausible scenario for future interactions without raising suspicions. Extensive surveillance is conducted to gather information about the target's habits and preferences, which helps craft a convincing scenario. The scenario is designed to align with the target's daily activities or interests, such as frequenting a bar or store. The undercover officers approach the target casually and in a friendly manner, aiming to pique interest without revealing the operation's true nature. After initial contact, controlled encounters gradually build rapport and trust while gathering more personal information about the target. Elements of the fictitious organization are subtly introduced, portraying it as successful and trustworthy, ensuring the target feels no immediate pressure to engage in illegal activities. As trust is established, the scenarios gradually increase in complexity and risk, encouraging the target to take on small roles within the organization, with the ultimate goal of making them comfortable enough to share incriminating information, or in the best case, confessions. In Greg Fertuck's case, the bump occurred over scenarios 1 to 7 between August 6th and 23rd, 2018. Undercover officers posing as marketing supervisors at a liquor store frequented by Fertuck conducted a fake survey with a prize draw. Fertuck participated and was rigged to win a second-place trip to Banff Canmore, facilitating his first significant interaction with operatives. The next stage in a Mr. Big operation is called the hook. This was Scenario 8 and took place on September 13, 2018. Fertuck and his partner Doris were picked up by an undercover officer and flown to Calgary under the guise of their prize. They were introduced to CP, an undercover officer who would play a pivotal role in drawing Fertuck deeper into the fictitious gang. This scenario marked the start of recorded interactions. Other key scenarios included Scenario 17, which was geared toward demonstrating the organization's scope on October 3, 2018. It showcased the gang's scale and reinforced its credibility. Fertuck was taken on a road trip to Regina, introduced to Dave, and shown a warehouse stocked with goods, highlighting the gang's legitimate and criminal operations. Scenario 44 was a high-stakes poker game, December 5, 2018, intended to display the gang's sophistication and profitability through illegal gambling. Greg Fertuck participated in a high-stakes poker game staged by the RCMP. Each player required a minimum stake of $20,000, with the house keeping $20,000 and the winner taking home $80,000. Fertuck's role was to provide security for the event. However, the scenario had to be cut short due to Fertuck's severe intoxication. While at the hotel before the game, he became increasingly drunk to the point where he soiled himself, tripped, and fell down the stairs. The lead undercover officer, Kurt, ordered the scenario to end and had Fertuck return to his hotel room due to concerns for his safety and the realization that the intended points of the scenario were lost on him due to his state of mind. This incident was the worst drinking episode during the undercover operation, although there were several other examples.
Okay, so this guy is like so bloody guilty, right? So I'm just going to put that aside for a second, okay? But to be clear, when a Mr. Big happens, it's when police think someone is guilty, but they've not proven he's guilty. So here are the police letting an obvious alcoholic get that drunk during one of their operations, right? And putting himself in danger. How is that legal? How can we let the police put people's lives in danger like that? Right? And don't get me wrong, he's as guilty as sin, but what if he wasn't? Right. And what other dangerous scenarios did the cops just flagrantly put people in with these Mr. Big things, right?
Yeah. Well, I have an answer to your earlier question.
Okay.
So as of 2008, and so this is a bit old, the Mr. Big technique had been used more than 350 times across Canada. In 75% of these operations, the person of interest was either clear or charged with the offense. Of the cases prosecuted, in excess of 95% resulted in convictions. So we said earlier there were 350 convictions, so there's been a few others since this.
So 95 of the 75%. Right. Convicted. So I'm interested in that initial 20. I love how they parse numbers. I'm interested in that 25% of the people. So what's 25% of 350? How many people were like gone through the ringer who are completely innocent?
Yeah.
And you know what? If police Mr. Big me, right? And like I'd done nothing, I'd be suing them until their bloody department was closed down.
The operation was almost scuppered entirely when Greg Fertuck injured his head on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2018. He slipped on ice while entering a business, resulting in a fall that caused him to strike his head. This injury led to the development of several hematomas, bleeding on the brain. Despite the severity of the injury, Fertuck checked out of the hospital against medical advice. Following this incident, on January 8th, 2019, Doris called undercover officer Adam. She thought he was Greg's friend at this point, informing him that Fertuck had fallen and could not get up. Adam and CP, another undercover officer, went to Fertuck's house, finding him on the ground, unwashed for days and refusing medical assistance. This led to his hospitalization on January 10, 2019, when undercover officers called for an ambulance against his wishes. While in the hospital, Fertuck received treatment for his brain hematomas and a blood clot in his lung, undergoing physical and mental therapy to aid his recovery. He was discharged from the hospital a month later on February 15, 2019. The operation resumed on March 3rd, another month after Fertuck's hospitalization for his injury. This scenario introduced the character Sean, a corrupt police officer, and Alana, a woman another undercover officer, Jeff, had met at a bar and wanted to introduce to Greg. This scenario was crucial in demonstrating the organization's power and influence. Sean was presented as a cop who had secured a loan from the organization due to his involvement in illegal gambling. Fertuck was also reminded of the importance of honesty within the organization. Scenario 86, March 14, 2019. Fertuck and undercover officer Jeff were tasked with traveling from Saskatoon to Regina, highlighting the need for honesty and reinforcing the organization's expectations. This scenario involved an overnight trip, emphasizing Fertuck's willingness to engage in such activities again after his injury. Scenario 89, March 22, 2019. A border crossing scenario involving a bribe to a border guard was conducted. This scenario was designed to show Fertuck the gang's enhanced power
indicating that corrupt officials were working for them and pulling strings. Scenario 92, March 27, 2019. Another poker game scenario was held with Sean participating as a player. Unlike the previous poker game, Fertuck was not drinking and his behavior was noted to be vastly improved. This scenario further reintroduced the concept of illegal poker games and the revenue they generated for the gang. Scenario 96, April 3, 2019. This scenario involves setting up a future important scenario by demonstrating the absolute importance of honesty within the organization. An employee, Chad, was fired for dishonesty, despite his attempts to cover up his mistakes. This reinforced to Fertuck that dishonesty would lead to expulsion from the gang, making a significant impression on him. Scenario 102, April 14, 2019. Fertuck was involved in a trip to Vancouver for a counterfeit passport scenario. During this trip, Adam discussed the gang's ability to clean up crime scenes, further embedding Fertuck into its operations and emphasizing their capabilities and resources. Scenario 104 on April 16, 2019 was a critical part of the undercover operation. It involved a staged gun deal to test Greg Fertuck's familiarity with firearms and deepen his involvement with the fictitious criminal organization. The scenario required special approval due to its high-risk nature and was designed to make Fertuck feel integral to the operation. During the setup, Fertuck was brought into a controlled location, shown several firearms, and asked to provide his expertise. During this interaction, Fertuck made a significant, spontaneous admission, stating that, quote, the police would never find Sheree Fertuck's body, end quote, directly contradicting his previous claims of innocence to officials. This admission was crucial as it aligned with holdback evidence and implied his deeper involvement in his wife's disappearance. This scenario reinforced the strategy of gradually increasing the complexity and risk of activities, leading to Fertuck's comfort with the organization and eventual incriminating disclosures, providing essential evidence for his arrest and later prosecution. The undercover operation culminated in Scenario 133, where Fertuck met Christian, the supposed crime boss, in a Saskatoon hotel. This scenario was designed to pressure Fertuck by suggesting he was in significant legal jeopardy, exacerbated by a fake RCMP letter to the FBI. During the meeting, Christian clarified that Fertuck was free to leave at any time, but Fertuck chose to stay.
So, you're going through all these scenarios, and I'm going, at this point, I'm 133 times.
Mm-hmm.
So the police have done 133 fake stories with somebody that might or might not be guilty.
Yeah, they're leading him toward a confession.
133 times.
Right. Yeah.
Well, wow. And again, I think we should do some episodes where they did it and there was nobody charged because the person didn't do it. But anyway. There's
one in particular that I'm thinking about.
Yes, I know the one you're talking about, and that will get me really rampant.
Okay.
So 130. So somebody's life is meeting up with undercover cops, unbeknownst to them, 133 times.
Mm-hmm.
Police should not have that much power.
In this important scenario, Christian began by discussing Fertuck's health and memory after his head injury, establishing rapport. The conversation quickly shifted to Fertuck's problem, with Christian implying that Fertuck's criminal exposure needed to be cleaned up. Fertuck immediately identified this as related to his wife's disappearance and admitted he was a prime suspect. Christian told Fertuck that he was going to be arrested for killing his wife and that he only had two options: seek help from the organization or not. Fertuck chose to seek help. During the conversation, Fertuck confessed to killing Sheree, initially giving a general account and later providing more details. He explained that he shot her because she was trying to take everything he had worked for. Fertuck said he used a Ruger .22 rifle, disposed of her body wrapped in plastic east of Kenaston, and got rid of the gun. It was the one police couldn't find when they'd executed their first search warrant at his house. Fertuck had detailed the incident, including shooting her twice, once in the shoulder and once in the head, and how he'd disposed of the body and weapon. Fertuck consistently maintained his account throughout the interview, demonstrating reliability in his confession. Fertuck was arrested on June 24, 2019, and his apprehension was executed in a controlled manner to ensure safety and secure additional evidence. Greg Fertuck was charged with first-degree murder and offering an indignity to human remains based on his confession and corroborating evidence gathered during the operation. After his arrest, he was interrogated and reiterated his earlier admissions, further solidifying the case against him. Fertuck was remanded in custody and remained detained, having abandoned his application for interim release. The detailed confession offered during the undercover operation was crucial in the legal proceedings, with the court ultimately admitting the evidence into trial. Even though he'd already admitted to killing Sheree on several occasions, he pleaded not guilty. For various reasons, including the COVID-19 pandemic and Fertuck firing his lawyers, the proceedings against him would take almost 5 years to wind their way through the courts. His trial began in September 2021 in Saskatchewan. Perhaps the most dramatic testimony came from Sheree and Greg's children. They had seen and heard a lot over the years. Lauren Fertuck, Sheree and Greg's eldest daughter, testified. Lauren said that during drives together in Sheree's semi-truck hauling gravel, Sheree confided in her about the troubles in her marriage with Greg. Sheree told Lauren she was scared Greg would do something to her, and that if anything happened, Lauren should look at Greg as the suspect and take care of Sheree's dog. Lauren then testified that Greg was abusive toward Sheree, herself, and her siblings, making threats like, "I'll gut you like a fish," and, quote, "I'll kill you," when drunk. She never saw Greg physically assault Sheree, but Sheree showed her bruises. Greg referred to Sheree as, quote, "a bipolar witch and a snake." Lauren believed from the beginning that Greg was responsible for her mother's disappearance in December 2015 because of the threats he'd made against Sheree. She maintained a relationship with her father until her mother went missing. On cross-examination, Lauren confirmed one of Sheree's friends was also told by Sheree to look at Greg if anything happened to her. Lauren said she first learned police suspected Greg when he was arrested in 2017. Lucas Fertuck, Greg and Sheree's son, also served as a key Crown witness at his father's first-degree murder trial for allegedly killing his mother. Lucas testified about the turbulent and at times violent relationship between his parents, stemming from issues like Greg's gambling, drinking, and finances. He recounted witnessing physical altercations and his father threatening to shoot his mother Sheree, quote, "between the eyes," before they separated. Despite this dysfunction, the family had some positive memories from activities like fishing and hunting trips, where Greg showcased his skills as an avid gun collector and skilled marksman. Notably, Lucas stated that the last time he spoke to his mother was when she wished him a happy birthday shortly before her disappearance in December 2015. After that, he never heard from her again. Lana Fertuck, the Fertuck's youngest daughter, testified that she and her siblings had long suspected their father, Greg Fertuck, was responsible for their mother's murder. She stated that Greg had a history of verbal and physical violence towards Sheree, often fueled by his drinking and gambling, leading to conflicts over her finances. Lana recounted that on the day Sheree went missing, she failed to return home from her job hauling gravel, which was unusual. When Lana informed Greg about Sheree's absence, he seemed unconcerned and told her to let him know if they ever found her. Lana maintained that despite the defense's suggestions of other potential suspects, her mother only had animosity toward Greg, and she disagreed with the claim that Greg had nothing to gain from getting rid of Sheree.
You know, Mike, you know, these kids, it just breaks my heart. So while I can bitch about Mr. Big and the methodologies, like, of course I'm glad that he's caught, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for these kids to have had to deal with this guy all their lives,
yeah,
you know, I don't know how somebody can be that selfish to treat their spouse and their children like that.
Well,
this guy was like just a bloody hurricane in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And how could he be so heartless and cruel to them all? He has, 3 kids, and he's not saying where her body is.
Right. Corporal Terry Heroux and Sergeant Ryan Clooney from the RCMP Forensic Identification Unit testified about the evidence seized from Greg Fertuck's home and the gravel pit where Sheree was last seen. In the initial search of Greg's home in 2015, they found clothing items, a rifle, ammunition, and other gun-related items. A later search in 2019 after Greg's arrest uncovered additional ammunition, cell phones, and a shotgun barrel. A spot of blood matching Sheree's DNA profile was found in the back of Greg's truck. Clooney noted that while traces of potential blood were found on the loader Sheree had been using, the scene had been contaminated by searchers initially treating it as a missing persons case rather than a homicide investigation. In November 2021, as the trial went on, police discovered a major piece of evidence in the case against Greg Fertuck when a rural couple, Courtney and Dean Williams, found the firearm allegedly used to kill Sheree Fertuck. While moving a grain bin on their property near Saskatoon, which had been purchased in 2020, Courtney Williams uncovered a Ruger 10-22 semi-automatic rifle hidden just a couple of inches beneath where the bin had been resting. The discovery matched the type of rifle Greg Fertuck confessed to using during the Mr. Big undercover operation in 2019. It was found where he stated he had disposed of the rifle west of Saskatoon after shooting Sheree twice. The Williams contacted the police after recognizing the rifle from news coverage related to the case. RCMP forensic firearms expert Kenneth Chan analyzed the rifle and confirmed that markings on the two .22 caliber shell casings found at the gravel pit where Sheree went missing in 2015 matched test fires from the discovered Ruger 10-22 rifle. Although Sheree's body has not been found, the recovery of the rifle provided critical physical evidence linking Greg Fertuck to the alleged murder scene. Greg Fertuck's behavior throughout his murder trial and court proceedings was often disruptive and defiant, drawing reactions of frustration from the judge and Crown prosecutors. Fertuck initially had legal representation but fired his lawyers midway through the trial in September 2021, choosing to represent himself against the court's advice. As a self-represented defendant, Fertuck frequently interrupted proceedings with rambling statements, sarcastic comments, and accusations against the Crown. Justice Richard Daniluk had to repeatedly admonish him for being disrespectful and unhelpful. During his closing arguments in June 2024, Fertuck provocatively stated, "Show me the body, Mr. Bliss," to the Crown prosecutor, challenging the lack of a recovered body as evidence against him. The Crown argued circumstantial evidence like bloodstains was sufficient. Just over a week before the verdict was delivered, Fertuck filed a, quote, ill-conceived application for a mistrial or to reopen his case for more evidence, which the judge denied as being without legal foundation and a, quote, fishing expedition. He reminded Greg Fertuck that he was in a courtroom, not a playground. When the guilty verdict was read on June 14, 2024, Fertuck shook his head in disbelief, despite the judge stating, quote, "There's too much evidence against him." Justice Daniluk strongly criticized Fertuck's character in his ruling, describing him as a misogynistic, abusive alcoholic, and referring to him as the Dark Cowboy, a nickname Fertuck had used for himself during the Mr. Big operation. Sheree Fertuck's sisters, who were present, expressed relief at the guilty verdict, saying they always knew Fertuck was capable of killing Sheree based on his history of threats and domestic violence. The Crown prosecutors commended the RCMP for persisting with a lengthy Mr. Big sting that ultimately produced Fertuck's confession despite the lack of a body. Although, as of this writing, Fertuck has yet to be sentenced, a first-degree murder conviction in Canada carries an automatic life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. He is scheduled for a sentencing hearing on July 4th, 2024. This will allow time for Sheree's family members to prepare victim impact statements. Sheree's body remains missing.
I hope he gets 1,000 years. And why wouldn't he say where she is? Give your kids a break, give society a break, just fess up.
So if you're looking for a deeper dive into this case, please check out the CBC podcast, The Pit. They really, really get deep into this. It's multiple episodes. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 324. What happened to Sheree Fertuck? That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week. Here's our first voicemail.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I am calling from Payton, Saskatchewan. It's Paynton. So not Peyton, Payton. Anyways, I just finished listening to episode 319, and there was a caller who talked about being from around or near Lloydminster, Saskatchewan, and it sounded like you boys might be a little confused about that. So there are not two Lloydminsters. Lloydminster actually is one city that covers across both Saskatchewan and Alberta border. So there is a Lloydminster, Saskatchewan side and a Lloydminster, Alberta side. So I just thought I would clarify that for you. Anyways, have yourselves a great day. Love the podcast and go shit in your hat. Bye for now.
So, Michelle, thank you. Yes, we do easily get confused. And I think that's so cool. I had no idea that there is this town that's across both provinces.
Yeah.
I think she's a cartographer, though.
She's a cartographer.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Look, because she knows all about it.
Payton and Lloydminster.
I was going to jokingly say, thank you, Michelle from Payton. after she called out, it's not Payton.
Oh, boy.
Thanks for calling, Michelle.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, let's listen to our next one.
Hello. Hello, Mike, Matthew, and Steve. This is Maisie. I'm originally from Newfoundland, now living in Chatham, Ontario. I have a question. Why did you stop saying just two Canadian schmucks? I'm just curious. I love the show, and I love Matthew on the show. Thanks. Take care.
So I've added it back. This is like the umpteenth caller who has called or emailed or texted or something and asked, why aren't you guys schmucks anymore? Guess what? We are now.
Do you know what? I didn't even notice that you had stopped saying it.
Yeah. Well, because you don't hear that part of the show.
I know.
You don't listen because you can't stand your voice.
I can't stand my own. I'm so glad that Maisie likes me on the show because I don't like me on the show.
Oh, I love you on the show, Matthew.
Thank you, Mike. You know, I have to say...
No homo.
No homo. I'm wearing a T-shirt. I'm saying a T-shirt. I'm wearing a T-shirt.
No, for me, it's maybe homo.
I'm wearing a T-shirt that says yes homo today.
Yeah.
Maisie, I actually was in Chatham. Like, you know, I'm from nearby. You know that. I grew up there, but I haven't really visited Chatham. And my brother and I did like a little tour. We're touring cannabis shops because of my business. And I really like Chatham. It's a nice town. So I hope you're enjoying living there.
Yeah. All right.
I think Maisie owns a greenhouse.
She owns a greenhouse. What does she grow in her
weed?
There you go. Weed.
Okay. Yeah, it's called Maisie's
Daisies.
No, Maisie's They Ain't Daisies.
Oh, there you go.
Hi, this is Angela calling from Keswick. Called in a few times before. So let's see. The butthole of Canada, or even Ontario, would be where I'm currently living now, Keswick. You know, we always called it the Wick. Growing up, this area had a stigma for biker gangs and everything like that. I don't know what body part is usually forgotten about or left out, because that is the area of Ontario that I grew up in. I grew up in a little tiny town called Pefferlaw. So whatever the forgotten body part is, like, I don't know, let's call us the appendix. The appendix of Ontario. And if you want to get really out there, I mean, my grandparents and my parents currently live in a little town called Madawaska, Ontario, which would be another forgotten body part. But anywho, instead of saying go shit in your hats, I'm taking one from Matthew and go plop in the yard. Have a great day, guys.
Oh, yeah, go plop in the yard. Well, there you go.
Thanks, Angela. It's funny that you call Keswick the Wick, because there used to be a bar in London, Ontario called the Brunswick Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone just called it the Wick. And it was, my brother used to play there. My brother rented a room above for practicing the band. And the Wick was this, it was a total dive, but it was one of those special places that everyone loved. And eventually over time, it just sadly got ripped down. So, so Keswick, I was just looking up Keswick. Yeah, you're kind of like on like almost the back foot.
The back foot?
Yeah. Kind of like a pimple on the bum.
Oh, no. Now, you've probably offended somebody from Keswick.
No, but remember, I said I was not going to tell, and I've not been to Keswick. I'm sure it's lovely. But, and I did not say what is the butthole or any other parts of Ontario. I let people call in and say if they don't like where they live. Right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
but
there you go.
Angela seems lovely, doesn't she?
Yes, definitely.
She's called in before.
That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. Let's move on to PayPal and Patreon, Donut Money donors, etc. And we do have a Donut Money donor this week. Okay. And it is Janelle Switzer, and Janelle is from the place you think I'm from, Abbotsford, British Columbia.
Janelle Switzer from Abbotsford.
She says, I thank you for all the great podcast episodes. I've been binge listening for some time and am now up to episode 224. I'm already sad thinking I'll be caught up one day soon. Lol. But you know what you can do? You can go back and listen to them again. Because that helps the show if you re-download them.
Abbotsford.
Yep. Abbotsford.
What's the big businesses in Abbotsford?
I am not really sure.
And how far is Abbotsford from you, Mike? Am I completely off when I always think you're in Abbotsford?
It's about 33 minutes away.
Okay,
driving.
That's not too far then.
Yeah. I don't know what the industry is in Abbotsford, really. Agriculture, of course. Manufacturing, it looks like aviation and transportation. Oh, interesting. Well, there you go. Home to a $1.8 billion agricultural sector. So I guess we would call agriculture the big business there.
I didn't know Abbotsford was so agricultural, but they've had some. Didn't Abbotsford have some really bad floods a while ago?
There were some floods in the valley, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just floods aren't good for farmers. I can tell you that much.
They're not good for anybody, really.
Being from a family with lots of farmers, making your living on something that has to put up with Mother Nature is very difficult sometimes.
So I wonder what Janelle does there in Abbotsford. Maybe something to do with farming?
No, she's a DJ. She's a superstar DJ.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, superstar DJ. She's always flying around.
There you go. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my book, Murder, Madness, and Mayhem, is available to order via a link on the Dark Poutine website. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, please check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you took the time to give Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening, and tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing.
And that's it for this episode of Dark Poutine. Until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Goodbye, everybody. Wish me luck getting better.
Yeah.